You can have you.
Main event of the evening.
Ready to race to you.
These days are
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today we are discussing Season 8, Episode 21, Mother and Child Reunion.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Mother and Child Reunion.
We open at the Cunningham house during breakfast time, where Howard is in an unexpectedly good and frisky mood.
Howard, you're in such a good mood. You weighed yourself. You know, it doesn't count when you hang from the shower rod.
Before he and Marion can do anything, the doorbell rings, and a young man asks if Fonzie lives there. Receiving an answer in the affirmative, in rushed the entirety of Fonzie's auto class.
Hey, this is it, guys. Let's go.
Fonzie escorts them out. He's taking them on a field trip to the junkyard to get parts.
Where are you boys going?
I'm taking them on a very educational and cultural sojourn.
Oh, that's terrific. Where are you taking him?
Junkyard.
With which to make a new car. At a diner, a waitress named Angela is tiredly taking orders when Fonzie and his class file in. Eugene is cleaning off a spoon because you don't know whose mouth those have been in, and Fonzie basically says that Eugene's parents don't love him.
Did your parents really want children? Oh, yes, very much. You must have been so disappointed when you were born.
Angela comes to take everyone's order, and Fonzie is speechless upon seeing her and her name tag.
Well, I think I'll get on the bandwagon here, and I'll have a patty.
If you're having trouble, the next word is melt.
Once Angela leaves, Chachi observes that Fonzie is turning green, and he takes the boys out of the diner. 3 days later, Fonzie still hasn't left his apartment, and Chachi and Al are both worried about him.
Do you realize he spent the past 3 days in his apartment? Alone?
I wish he was here right now.
Yeah.
Don't call him that meat company.
Fonzie finally does show up at Arnold's, and he tells Chachi to call the other students so they can go back to the junkyard and the diner. When they return to the diner, Chachi demands to know why Fonzie is acting bongo, and Fonzie reveals that Angela, the waitress, is his mother. Fonzie hasn't seen his mother since he was 4, but her name was Angela.
My mother's name was Angela. That waitress's name is Angela.
Oh, well, that clinches it. She's your mother.
And Fonzie has a photo of himself, age 3, with his mother. Chachi doesn't see a resemblance between the photo and the waitress. Fonzie can't bring himself to actually talk to Angela about their possible relation, and he and the class just sit down with their food. Another customer, Big Harold, sexually harasses Angela.
All right, Big Harold, what'll it be, the usual?
Yeah, that'll be fine, baby.
Stay cool, Fonz, all right?
And Chachi tries to stop Fonzie from retaliating. He doesn't succeed, and Fonzie orders Harold not to touch Angela ever again. Instead, Harold harasses Angela some more,
Don't you ever slap that waitress again.
and he and Fonzie go into the kitchen to fight. Moments later, Harold stumbles out and collapses onto the floor, and then Fonzie calmly strolls out as well.
Why don't you get this slab of meat out of here? Bring him back to his diesel.
He sends his students out to the junkyard, while he stays behind. Angela asks why Fonzie did that to Harold, and she tends to a small cut on his forehead. They talk, and Fonzie shows her his photograph. She realizes the boy in the photo is Fonzie, and he says the woman is his mother.
Do you see any resemblance whatsoever?
Yeah, she looks a lot like the kid.
Angela, don't you think that maybe she looks a little like you?
He also says he's glad Angela isn't his mother, because he doesn't know what he would actually say to a woman who walked out on a 4-year-old. Somewhat sheepishly, he tries to apologize for his outburst. Angela recounts the story of a woman she knew who got married when she was only 17, and a kid came along a year later, and then her husband ran out on her. She fell apart, and she thought things would be better if someone else could raise him. The years passed, and she wanted to see her son, but she never did, because she had given him up and she had given up the right to be a mother. But she never forgot him. Maybe that's how it was for Fonzie's mother. She speaks from experience. She had a little girl.
I had a little...
Boy?
No, I had a little girl.
You sure it wasn't a boy?
No, they tell you at the hospital.
Chachi runs in to tell Fonzie that the other students have started shoving rocks down Eugene's pants. Fonzie sends him back out, and tells Angela he's maybe started to understand his mother more. He offers to stop by again sometime so they can chat, and Angela says she'd like that. He kisses her on the cheek goodbye and leaves, accidentally leaving behind one of the photos, which Angela tucks into her uniform.
Thank you, Peter. That was Mother and Child Reunion. It first aired back on May 19th, 1981. Happy Days was followed that night by a new Laverne and Shirley, in which Laverne gets singing lessons from Carmine so she can perform during amateur night at Cowboy Bill's.
No. You are too fortissimo, too allegro, too quattro.
Oh, is that bad?
It ain't good.
CBS had a new episode of Palmer's Town, USA. This week, WD invests his life savings in a seemingly worthless plot of land because he believes there's oil on it.
Oil, that is. Black gold. Texas tea.
And NBC aired a rerun of the now canceled Lobo. This was the one where Deputy Perkins supposedly, but not really, dies on the operating table and Lobo investigates. So, Peter, of those three choices, what are you watching?
I'm watching Lobo for old time's sake. We miss you, Sheriff Lobo, and your absolutely bonkers episode synopses.
I'm going to miss Sheriff Lobo as well, but I think I'm going to use this week to check out Palmer's Town, USA. That show is not going to be on the air for very long, so we need to check it out while we still can.
Good point.
Mother and Child Reunion was directed by Jerry Paris, and it was written by our pal Fred Fox Jr. and Babaloo Mandel. Born Mark Mandel in New York City in 1949, Babaloo is a very prolific TV and film writer whose career stretches from the late 70s to about the mid-2000s. Mother and Child Reunion is his first script credit on this show, but he's been on the writing staff at Happy Days since season 7. He's the longtime writing partner of another Happy Days scribe, Lowell Gans. Babaloo worked on several of the Gary Marshall sitcoms, including Makin' It and Laverne and Shirley, but he's best known for a series of movie scripts he co-wrote with Gans for director Ron Howard. Splash, Night Shift, Gung Ho, Parenthood, and Ed TV.
Today I'm sitting here with the writing team of Lowell Gans and Babaloo Mandel. Together, these two have penned 18 produced screenplays, including everything from Gone with the Wind to Battleship Potemkin. No, I'm kidding. From everything from Night Shift, Splash, City Slickers, A League of Their Own, and Fever Pitch.
And Schindler.
And Schindler's List.
Their other movies include A League of Their Own for Penny Marshall, plus Spies Like Us, Father's Day, Multiplicity, Mr. Saturday Night, and City Slickers. Incidentally, Babaloo's nickname is not a reference to the song by Desi Arnaz. It's a character in the 1969 Philip Roth novel Portnoy's Complaint. As for guest stars this week, obviously the main one is Janice Page as Angela. Janice is a very accomplished singer and actress from Tacoma, Washington, with TV, film, and stage credits ranging from 1944 to 2001. She's perhaps best known for starring in the Broadway production of The Pajama Game in 1954, a role that landed her on the cover of Esquire that year and even led to her own sitcom, It's Always Jan, in 1955 and 1956.
All right, so I'll be the Grandma Moses of the nightclubs. So they'll have to wheel me on stage. At least when I get there, I'll be able to look people in the eye, right?
Among her dozens of TV roles, maybe the most iconic is Denise, the waitress who almost tempts Archie Bunker away from Edith on All in the Family. Janice had recurring roles on Lanigan's Rabbi, Eight is Enough, Trapper John M.D., General Hospital, and Santa Barbara. She also turned up on Columbo, Night Court, The Love Boat, Fantasy Island, The Rockford Files, The Mary Tyler Moore Show, Alice, and other shows. Her movies include Silk Stockings, Please Don't Eat the Daisies, and Romance on the High Seas. As of 2022, she's still alive at the age of 99 and may be one of the last living stars of Hollywood's golden age. So, Peter, what did you think of Janice Page as Angela?
She was really great in this episode. The role requires her to play this kind of jaded, tough-talking diner waitress, which is a character archetype you don't really see anymore. I guess because diners have become less of a central part of popular culture, but she plays it incredibly well. And it also requires her to show this more vulnerable side when she's talking to Fonzie. And she plays that incredibly well, too. Her heart-to-heart with Fonzie is a genuinely very lovely moment. It's left up to the audience interpretation as to whether she actually is his mother or not. And however you interpret it, it's just a very lovely scene. This isn't about Janice Page specifically, but I appreciate the restraint that the makers of this episode showed in not shoving in lots of sad music during that scene. They leave it up to the writing and the performances to carry it, and that's a much better choice.
I think Janice Page gives a remarkable performance in this episode. Obviously, this is a very big part on Happy Days. Depending on how you interpret this episode, this is a very pivotal moment in Fonzie's life. And Angela, the waitress, cannot be a letdown. And Janice Page definitely isn't one. She plays the comedy very well. She plays the drama extremely well. And she does have that world-weary quality of a woman who's had a lot of life experiences, some good, some bad, and is working in this rather seedy diner. I was very impressed with Janice Page's performance, and I was also very impressed with her resume. She has had an amazing career.
Yeah.
And I'm glad she's still alive at 99. We also have Ray Jardine as Big Harold, the customer at the diner.
Okay, here you go, Big Harold. When you finish that, I got a nice bone for you.
Ray was an actor from Massachusetts who worked steadily from the late 1960s to the late 1990s in both TV and film. This is Ray's second time on Happy Days. He was also in The Kissing Bandit back in season 6. Ray had recurring roles on Charlie and Company and Thunder, but he was mainly a guest actor. His credits include Mork and Mindy, Man from U.N.C.L.E., Barney Miller, Greatest American Hero, Benson, Dallas, Newhart, Beverly Hills 90210, and many more. His films include Hollywood Man and Skag. Ray died at the age of 84 in 2019. Peter, any opinion on Ray Jardine as Big Harold?
I think he accomplishes what the role requires of him. He's a seemingly friendly guy who is actually a huge creep who probably doesn't think of himself as a creep. He just does what he's supposed to do, and that is sexually harass the waitress who did not ask for that.
This is a thankless part. You have to be the big lug who not only harasses Angela, but loses a fight to Fonzie. But somebody has to do it. And I think Ray Jardine does very well with this stock sitcom part.
Yep.
As for songs this week, Tom Bosley sings a bit of Top Hat, White Tie, and Tails.
It's not my white tie. There she is.
Irving Berlin wrote that for the 1935 movie Top Hat, where it was famously performed by Fred Astaire.
Oh, I'm putting on my top hat, tying up a white tie, brushing off my tails.
Even though it was their only appearance in the episode, I was very charmed by Howard and Marion's little moment at the beginning.
I was too. This is such a nice little moment, and I'm glad that they wrote it in. At Arnold's, we hear Puff the Magic Dragon by Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Alley Cat by Bent Fabric. We've been hearing those all season. As for cultural and historical references this week, this episode is named after a 1972 song by Paul Simon, who says he got the title Mother and Child Reunion from the name of a chicken and egg dish at a Chinese restaurant. The lyrics, however, were inspired by the death of Paul's dog. This was the first death he had ever personally experienced, and it made him wonder how he would react if his wife had died.
I'm looking over my dead dog Rover, who I hit with a power more.
While singing a song from Top Hat, Howard tells Marion, "There's my Ginger."
There she is. There's my Ginger.
Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers were an iconic dance duo that appeared in 10 films together between 1933 and 1949, including such classics as Top Hat and Swing Time. Howard also says,
"Spring is in the air, and when it's spring, a young man's fancy turns to..."
To what?
To this, Marion.
He may not know it, but he's referencing Locksley Hall, a poem from 1842 by Alfred Lord Tennyson. The actual quote is, "In the spring, a young man's fancy lightly turns to thoughts of love." Now, I've heard that quote many times, but I have never actually read Locksley Hall, the poem. Were you familiar with the whole poem?
Not with the whole poem, no. It's a one-hit wonder, but just for the one line, not the whole poem.
The exact origin of Hubba Hubba is unclear.
Oh, hubba, hubba.
But soldiers started using it during World War II. Fonzie asks Eugene, "What in the name of Dion and the Belmonts are you doing?"
What in the name of Dion and the Belmonts are you doing?
Dion and the Belmonts were an extremely popular vocal group of the late 50s, led by Dion DiMucci. Their hits include Runaround Sue, The Wanderer, and Ruby Baby. Dion and the Belmonts went their separate ways in 1960. Dion had his career, the Belmonts had theirs.
Me, meow. You guys, meow. Maybe a little more than meow.
In 1989, Dion was inducted without the Belmonts into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, even though he had his vast majority of hits with that group.
Wow, dick move. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Fonzie's joke to Eugene about Eugene's parents wanting children and being disappointed when he was born is nearly identical to one that Groucho Marx used on Zeppo Marx in the 1932 film Horse Feathers.
"I married your mother because I wanted children. Imagine my disappointment when you arrived."
So Fonzie is ripping off jokes from Groucho. And scoff if you must, but Eugene is right to be wary of the utensils at restaurants. Researchers at Ohio State University conducted studies proving that a gastroenteritis-causing virus is highly likely on all public silverware, even after it's been washed and dried.
In this restaurant, you have been given a dirty, filthy, smelly piece of cutlery.
It wasn't smelly.
Experts say that restaurants are likely to be safe as long as they've passed health inspections. However, if you are not certain of the cleanliness of a restaurant or diner, you should probably wipe down the utensils and all other surfaces, such as the table and chair, or simply consider eating elsewhere.
Yeah, and this is like a very stereotypical greasy spoon diner, so it's probably a good idea to ungrease the spoons there first.
Fonzie carries a picture of the Lone Ranger in his wallet. The character was not entirely dormant during the 1960s. His TV series ended in 1957, and his most recent movie at the time had been The Lone Ranger and the Lost City of Gold in 1958, but he got a new animated series in 1966 on CBS.
His sign, a silver bullet. His name, the Lone Ranger.
He also had a comic book from Gold Key that ran from 1964 to 1977. He even has a comic book now from Dynamite Entertainment. So the Lone Ranger has not disappeared entirely.
Although I will say that unfortunately my and probably many others' main association with him right now is the bad 2013 movie. So that's a shame.
That pretty much killed his career. But they said that about the 1981 movie The Legend of the Lone Ranger with Clinton Spilsbury. That was also a big embarrassment for the Lone Ranger.
He could still make a comeback someday. Hopefully not with a white guy playing Tonto again.
Yeah, they're going to have to wait like 20 years on this one. Angela says that she misses Hitler. Adolf Hitler was the dictator of Germany from 1933 until his suicide in the Führer bunker in 1945, but there were numerous conspiracy theories claiming that he and Eva Braun escaped to South America.
South America!
The FBI and CIA actually investigated these theories, but never found evidence to support them. And Fonzie says he'll be Emily Manners. He's combining the names of two famous experts on etiquette. Emily Post was a socialite from Baltimore who wrote a best-selling book on etiquette in 1922 when she was 50. The book was updated and revised many times after that. Miss Manners, meanwhile, is the pen name of Judith Martin, a syndicated columnist from Washington, D.C. She's still alive today, but her children have taken over the long-running newspaper feature. And Fonzie refers to Big Harold as Gargantua. Gargantua and Pantagruel were a pair of father and son giants.
We're father and son, we'll do it all.
In a series of satirical novels by Rabelais in the 16th century. Peter, were you familiar with the adventures of Gargantua and Pantagruel?
Not directly, but I had heard of them.
I had heard of them, but I'd never actually read their stuff. So maybe that's something to put on the to-do pile.
Yep.
And Fonzie also tells Big Harold to mind his P's and Q's. No one knows the exact origin of this phrase, which goes back to the 1850s. Many experts now think it refers to children learning the alphabet and how to write upper and lowercase letters. There are numerous other theories, however, including one that says it's a shortened version of pleases and thank yous.
Huh. That sounds like it could be BS, but I hope it's true.
Other observations, we get another Jiminy Crickets from Howard. They're really trying with this one, Peter. They are really trying.
They're not succeeding, but they are trying.
You got to give them an A for effort. And now, in the past, I have compared Fonzie's auto shop students with the sweat hogs from Welcome Back, Kotter. The comparison gets even more obvious this week when the shop kids invade the Cunningham house. The sweat hogs were always doing this kind of thing to Mr. Cotter. And Eugene Belvin is clearly derived from Horseshack.
He's right, Mr. Cotter.
I will also add that Fonzie in this episode is not a great teacher. Dude, yes, Eugene is annoying, but you are his teacher. Be professional. Don't bully him too.
Fonz needs to work on that. Throughout this episode, Angela uses a lot of colorful language known as diner lingo.
Bucky, cry me up a couple of cows, make them cry and bleed on them.
These are slang terms used by restaurant waitstaff to communicate orders to cooks, often in a humorous or ribald way. Though this tradition may go back as far as the 1870s, it was most prominent in America between the 1920s and the 1970s. I have never heard actual restaurant staff use this kind of slang. I've only seen it in movies and TV shows.
I have also never directly experienced this kind of slang, but I figure that's just because I wasn't able to go to the right restaurants at the right time.
You know, if you went to a diner in the 1950s or 60s, you'd hear this stuff all the time.
Yeah, you have to go to very specific places that are like converted dining cars in New Jersey right at the midpoint of the 1950s.
Now, this was the big mystery of this episode, Peter, and maybe you will help me understand this. Why on earth does Fonzie invite Chachi and all the other students on the return trip to the diner? That made no sense to me.
My best guess is that they didn't finish getting all the parts they needed from the junkyard the first time, or Fonzie is genuinely so nervous about potentially seeing his mother again that he figures he has to bring along all of his students so he has something else to think about besides this potential reunion.
Maybe he feels like if he has all of these students around him, he'll have a reason to keep his emotions under control, even though Fonzie never keeps his emotions under control.
It's why we love him. He's just a big melodramatic disaster.
And he is in this episode, too.
Although he does have good reason to be melodramatic, considering he's been through some stuff.
Yeah, this week he has a great reason to be melodramatic. In case you were wondering, the name of the diner is J and Z's Eats.
I seen you jockin' JC, jockin' JC, jockin' JC, jockin' JC.
Okay, we've had wacko, nutso, and even bonzo. This week, Chachi adds another synonym, bongo.
I don't think this one really works, but it's an admirable try.
According to this episode, Fonzie's dad abandoned him when Fonzie was 2. As Happy Days goes along, this pivotal event has been moved further and further up in Fonzie's life. Back in season 2, it happened when Fonzie was 12. By season 3, it was at age 4. By season 6, it was at age 3. Now, in season 8, it's when Fonzie was 2. So by the end of the series, Fonzie's dad will have abandoned him before the child was even conceived.
Clearly, we are seeing further ripples in the time stream, the same ones that also changed Chuck into a different actor and then erased him from existence.
They're moving that event earlier and earlier in Fonzie's life to make Fonzie more and more sympathetic. Like, it's sad if your father leaves you at 12, but it's sadder if he leaves you at 4. And it's even sadder at 3 and then sadder at 2. So they're really ramping up the tragedy of Fonzie's life. And Big Harold's delayed downfall reminded me so much of the 5-point palm exploding heart technique from Kill Bill Volume 2. Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in this episode?
Angela's diner uniform, very classic diner waitress. Other than that, not really.
Did you have any other observations you wanted to make about mother and child reunion?
I did find it kind of interesting that if you do interpret her as Fonzie's mother, Angela comes across as considerably more sympathetic than Fonzie's dad in that one Christmas episode where he showed up. But thinking about it, I don't think it's just because she's a woman. I think it's also because of the fact that if she is his mother, she did not seek him out. She basically accepted that, yeah, I do not have a right to come back into my child's life and give him all these complicated feelings after I was away for so long. They meet again by chance, if you interpret her as his mother. He's the one who tries to reach out to her and find some kind of common ground. So yeah, I think that's why she comes across as more sympathetic than Fonzie's terrible father.
I think one of the differences is that at least Fonzie's mother arranged some other living situation for her child. She didn't just abandon him the way Fonzie's father did. She at least made sure that Fonzie would be raised by someone caring, in this case, Grandma Nussbaum. So, Peter, I will ask that age-old timeless question, was this episode any good?
Absolutely. I think this is one of the best episodes of season 8. It's not really a laugh-out-loud funny episode, but it's remarkably well acted, and it's pretty well written, and it shows restraint in some areas where Happy Days doesn't usually show restraint. And I really appreciated it a lot.
This is also one of my favorite episodes from the season. And one of the things I appreciated is that the episode is actually kind of ambiguous and subtle. Those are not adjectives that we normally get to apply to Happy Days. The ending of this episode is very much open to interpretation. I've asked about this episode online, and some people tend to feel that Angela is Fonzie's mother, and some people tend to feel that she is not. Happy Days almost never lets us interpret anything. They explain everything to us.
It's not a subtle show.
No, it is not. In fact, they used to end practically every episode with the singers saying, "These are such happy days" at the end of the last scene.
So you don't forget the name of the show.
Not only do you not forget the name of the show, you don't forget the mood of the show. They're constantly reminding you that these are happy people living happy lives, and they are almost unwilling to let the characters have kind of a melancholy moment at the end of an episode. And this is one where they don't force the happiness. They don't force a happy ending. They don't solve everything in half an hour, because you can't solve a problem like this in half an hour. By Happy Days standards, mother and child reunion is quite a remarkable achievement. I actually hope that they do, in the remaining seasons of the show, more episodes in this vein where it's not so cut and dried, it's not so didactic, it's not so obvious, and maybe let the characters grow and learn and change in subtle, incremental ways. I was very pleased with this one. This is definitely one that all fans of Happy Days have to check out. Even if you are avoiding the post-Richie and Ralph episodes from seasons 8 through 11, there are a small handful of episodes that you still absolutely have to watch, and I think Mother and Child Reunion is one of those. So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Peter Volfranc. That's PeterVulfranc.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com, and they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, it's the season finale, and it's also a musical and an excuse to put the cast in lots of period costumes.
This sounds like a very overloaded episode, and I don't know if I'll be emotionally and intellectually ready for it, but I will definitely make an attempt. So see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
No, I would not give you false hope on this strange and mournful day, but the mother-child reunion is only emotional way. Oh, little darling of mine, I can't for the life of me remember a Saturday. I know they say let it be, just don't regard that day. And the course of a lifetime runs over and over again. No, I would not give you false hope on this strange and mournful day, but the mother-child reunion is only emotional way.
Why don't you get this slab of meat out of here? Bring him back to his diesel.